Just a quick heads up, this little section that I'm going to do right now is not really, you don't necessarily need to watch this. This is just because I record the entire process, so I want to make sure you see it. So we're going to do hands and feet here. We're going to do a little tidying up. But like I said, it gets monotonous. Oh, and I forgot the clavicle. So if you picked that up from before, then we'll be covering that now. Alright, so let's see. And I'm going to go along the big toe. It's going to be the main axis I choose to work with. So it looks like we need to pull it in. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move those bones a little bit, but I'm actually going to come in and adjust the sculpt. In fact, let me check real quick. Yeah, I don't know how much I want to move the bones, because the bones obviously have, a lot more complexity. So let's press Control, go into Mask Lasso, and I'm going to just select the foot. Low subdivision level, invert, Control click to blur it. And we can draw out a little lever right there at the foot. We'll use it from this angle, but it'll still work. Go to rotate. And then I'm going to switch to move, press shift, and just move this thing over, back in, rotate. Okay, masking and blur. Or let's go along here. Ooh, that's really ugly. Blur. Okay, so for the most part, we're doing good. In fact, that line that I'm working with right there goes back a little farther. There we go. And moving that fibula back. Then moving it back again. And then I'm going to go into the bone. I think this leg got skewed. I'm not sure about that heel bone. But that'll solve that. So 5 minutes to do that. One of the reasons why I don't think you need to necessarily be paying full attention to this particular part. Let's make sure we're working with the dude. And we'll blur it. Okay, same thing on this heel, it wasn't quite matching. So that's pretty simple. Looks like I messed something up. Okay. Let's get the collarbone. And rotate is what we want. And we're just rotating up. Make sure this point does not change too much. And then we can rotate back. Let's return it to the high subdivision level. Okay, and then we select this. So ghost, all of that texture information goes away. That's where we're putting the acromion process. So that's why our shoulder girdle's not lining up. It's not actually placed correctly. There. That should be lining up now. That does mean I have to go back and recalculate though. Point A to point B. Do this with rotate though, so you don't alter the shape. And the spine of the scapula has changed. I think we'll move the humerus instead of doing anything else. Or if I wanted to, we could rotate it a little differently. Okay. Okay, do not resculpt that scapula. Do not change it in any way. This is just par for the course. So I would say that this is a fairly large mistake to make in terms of the painting, but it's not necessarily off. I think that the scapula is a little bit more accurate. But let's take a moment and actually be very clear about these things. So one of the things that you learn from medical textbooks is just very conventional numbers that you can work with. And so let me give you some of the numbers that I've seen in the Time Musculoskeletal Anatomy book. And I'm roughly positioning this so that it would be in a model that's, looking pretty much right at us. There we go. Alright, there's a lot going on here. The arm is reaching, which is pulling this way. It's also lifted, so the scapula is rotating. There's just a lot of stuff going on. But let's talk a little bit about numbers. So I'm going to draw a straight line, and then another straight line. Let's just draw it. Let's draw it right there. Okay, so let's put a mark at 30, 60. So right here at 30, that's going to be the maximum rotation that you're really going to see. And we're pretty close there, but notice that our arm is not raised all the way up, at least not enough yet to justify the 30. So we're probably at, say, about I'd say 20 degrees. That's going to work, I think, good for us. One of the other measurements that they take is if you're looking at things from, let's just say, that's 90. So whereas before, or at least if you look at it on the other side, there is actually some distance between the shoulder blades and what we've got here. This is about a 30-degree sense of rotation here, but because this is moved upwards, this is now 90 degrees. So instead, let's just cut this out. 120 degrees from here. So this is all 120 degrees, this entire arc. On the other side, that arc is 90 degrees, assuming that you have a very simple axis here. This might be a little confusing because of the way I started the conversation. But basically, you've got two axes. You've got one on the inside, 90, and then, let's say, 20. And then you have another one on the outside. It's either 120 or 90 or thereabouts. So those are just different angles that you can use to kind of look at how this is going. If I was not talking in medical terms, I would say look for a straight line in contrast to the diagonal line on the other side, because the rotation has effectively straightened that out. And now I'm getting about 20 degrees of rotation right in there. So I'd say everything done and said, we look like we're within reasonable depth. Okay, I might now take this and let's go along the humerus
I'm just going to drop it down. And maybe over. That's going to be fine. Okay. Fingers. Curling these fingers. Okay, I'm just going to click so I get a pivot point there. I'm not sold on the rotation. So I just want to make sure I get that a little bit more clear. Okay, we can definitely be adjusting the skeleton a little. I think the radius and ulna and all of this are definitely going to get a little bit more mass. Maybe not that much, but close. Just going to make sure I come over and I do the same thing here. Although I actually did increase the size of that, size of those carpals. And we also pushed these things out a little bit, so that's something I would do right now just to make sure that the hand has the depth that we're going to want it to have. The width, I mean, not the depth. Yeah, that matches the width. So what I just checked, let's get rid of that. These are the knuckles. Does that match up with the distance that you're seeing here? Pretty much. So the distance of those knuckles is pretty good. Now, where the hand is positioned isn't necessarily in the right place for our skeleton, but that's something we can resolve. Okay, and it looks like, as I'm thinking about this, we have a fundamental problem. So let's talk about that for a moment. We adjusted this hand, so we adjusted it and made this mistake. But I'm going to cut right from this corner pretty much straight out along the cylinder of the forearm. And you can look at this action yourself. If you cut right where that corner is, you're pretty much going to be you're going to be pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get the radius in the right position. So here's the radius bone going back in space, and then we're going to have the carpal bones and then the thumb moving out of the carpal. So that'll be in tune in there. And then we'll have the metacarpals and all of them in all of their glory. But I need to move things up because right now the radius is pulled all the way down into that. So that was a mistake that now needs to get fixed. And it also gave us a chance to be really clear about how you delineate these things. Let's go down to the lowest subdivision level, do that again. And then I'm going to blur it again. I just like to blur a couple of times. Elbow, styloid process. Okay, that's fine. Move along the normal. So there you go. I'm going to go into move, and I am going to adjust this slightly. It's all one polygroup, unfortunately. Something happened. There you go. Did too many undos. And also, okay, styloid process. I've got that fairly well indicated. Okay, let's take that all the way back up. I'm just pulling that carpals out a little bit. Let's get ourselves back into the bone. Okay. And then let's make sure that that's sitting up there a little bit. And make sure it's sitting along that radius. Okay, and then really, I mean, they've got a really strong bend to them that we don't have indicated in this very simplified version of what we have. But that'll work for now. And we're going to rotate these guys a little bit, and then we'll rotate the metacarpals a little bit more, just to keep it from being this simplified plane. Or if we really wanted to, we could get a lot of that just with the sculpt. Okay, move, and let's just move this out. Yeah, like that. Okay, I like that. That fits in with that a little bit better. Okay, looks like we might have to move it again, but for now, I'm going to focus on that thumb. Okay. Let me make sure I've got alright, good enough. Let's start talking about digits. How are these guys going to rotate? Okay, so we know we've got surface area similar to this. The I'll do it in green. The digit rides along this in a specific direction, just so you know. When you get to closing the fist, they're actually going to have moved down. So they're no longer going to be up here towards the top. They're going to be down, riding the bottom. Okay, and then that's kind of the same here. So they're rotating back and forth along this. You know, if they could bend backwards in space, they would. And then in the center, which I'll do in red, they would be positioned here. Let's make the pin a little bigger. Okay, so you got that whole axis, that whole range that you can work with. That means that the pivot point is going to be somewhere like that. Okay, now that was pure guesswork, and it's not guaranteed to be right from this axis, so you got to be mindful of that. But I am going to be mindful of the axes from the top, so I'm going to mirror that. There we go. And you might go along the length. Oops. Hate it when I press F and I'm working on this small of a thing. Just trying to get my axes correct. Okay, it'll be somewhere along those lines. And I am going to make my life much easier. And just work on these guys. Doing that though causes a bit of a problem. Be nice if these were a separate subtool. That's risky to separate them like that. Kind of don't recommend that. So what would I want to do? I'm not going to have much fun there. Make sure mask by polygroup is off if you turn that on. Okay, get it roughly lined up, get it sitting down there. And orientate it. Okay, some of these might need a bit of, well, they just might need a little work. Let's see if I can use this as a lever. Okay. That kind of works. I like it. I have to reposition it. It's not really a big deal. One more pinky finger to go, and we're there. And I'm really liking this approach. And move it around, and to rotate, reposition. So it looks like this metacarpal needs to get twisted around as well, so not a problem. And to draw, There we go. Only thing left is the vertebrae, the lumbar and the cervical, and we will largely have this thing positioned. We do need to deal with the scapula. I think we stopped. So why don't we do that real quick. Make sure we show everything. And it is highly likely that this scapula, the shoulder, that there's something wrong in here. I would not put it past the sculpt. Oops. And it's raised. There you go. Okay. So the clavicles are not exactly lining up with where I painted and sculpted them, but like I said, I would not be surprised if there was something off, similar to the scapula. So we're getting closer, getting ourselves into a position. You want to spend the time. You may want to inflate these bones. I would probably, and I probably will have a separate pass where I just enlarge the bones even more to fit more characteristically with this guy. One of the places where you can learn more about stuff like that is just searching for MRI photos or scans for the wrist and for different parts of the body, and that'll give you a sense of how much larger these things are than we might have here. So, all right, on to the next.